Hello. My name's Alastair Gordon, and I'm with a company called Gordon and McCallum, and it's a great pleasure to be talking to you here from New Zealand today. What I'm going to talk about today is a subject that's very, very interesting. One thing that Gordon and McCallum do is work with clients around the world to help improve market research deliverables. And one of our clients, a company called Enviso, a Swiss-based company, has invented a fascinating technology for recording people's emotions just by looking at their faces, essentially. And I'm going to talk about that, and more importantly, I'm going to talk about how I believe this could be quite revolutionary for market research. In 5 quick points, what I'm going to talk about is the fact that our faces mirror our emotions, something we know almost by common sense in our daily lives. But I'm also going to talk about how this measurement has become science-based of our facial expressions, how it's becoming increasingly easy to implement and interpret, how this gives us a way to assess reaction to a myriad of marketing material, and perhaps most importantly for this audience, how this allows us to get fast feedback across surveys from large or small samples. But let me start. I've worked in surveys for years. I am not against surveys. I like surveys. I put my life into them in many respects. They're simple, we might say sometimes too simple to do and create. You know, sort of per kilo of data, you get a lot for your money from a good survey. They're relatively easily understood. People inside clients and inside agencies generally sort of understand them, or at least think they understand them. At least on factual stuff, they're mostly accurate. You know, people don't usually lie too much, and they provide us with pretty targeted information about what people believe they believe. So especially as the economy gets tough and organisations get leaner, I don't expect them to die in the way some of the doomsday prognosis that you hear about surveys sometimes do. But, and this is a big but, there is a problem. It's a big, hard problem that we all as researchers have to look at. And that's a problem that when it comes to the soft stuff, when it comes to emotion and when it comes to the unconscious reactions or the ones we'd prefer to hide, surveys do have problems, and they've become under increasing criticism from not just the sort of neuroscientists and others and even the Martin Lindstroms and people, but from a wide community. And that's a problem that's first of all about accuracy of measurement, how we measure emotions and our ability to really get at them. It's also about the lack of discrimination that we often get in emotional results. And it's about the problems and complexity of many of the systems that have been tried to and been invented to try and make surveys work to find out about these things. The systems that use large effective scales or dial-up dials and so on to get people to do things. These lead, frankly, to too much rationalization of answers and a lot too much cost and complexity in measuring emotion. Measuring the emotion in people's faces, then, is potentially a simpler and easier answer. And it's an answer that was first thought of, well, in fact, it was first thought of by Darwin. But Paul Ekman and others in recent years, I'm sure many of you have heard of Paul Ekman as a very prominent psychologist, have done a lot of work on how our faces reveal emotional response. It's not my purpose in this talk to go through the academic background to this, but there's a lot. And essentially, they came up with the universality of 6 basic emotions: happiness, surprise, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. Now, those 6 emotions are not by any means all the emotions in the world. They're just the major ones that can be recognized on our faces, and there are others. This is not a new kind of research, let me hasten to add. There have been companies in the States and the US have done a lot of work in this area over many years, but usually using manual coders, which requires extensive expertise and training and is not as scalable as might be desired. What this company, Enviso, and some others that are working in this field are working on is how you automate the measurement of faces and facial expressions. And essentially they've come up with a software that maps 143 points in the face. So no matter how you pose your face, you can be recorded on a webcam or some other camera where no matter how you move your face around, we can pick out those individual points and follow them. And then artificial intelligence can relate those movements, these micro expressions that you have on your face, back to known correlates with emotions. In particular shapes or way you have your face or move your lips can be correlated with particular known emotions. And a very sophisticated machine learning system decodes that behavior and relates what it's seeing on the face to those emotions that I just talked about. The cool thing though, and that's sexy, it's really sexy that we can measure emotions over a webcam, but what really gets me about all of this is that we can deploy this globally. It's got massive potential reach in home. It can be done over any and the simplest of webcam, and it generates reports on these emotions almost automatically. So instant feedback and reporting, which is moreover objective. There's no argument about scales and types of scales, and is culturally unbiased. We can do a survey in China or Denmark, and indeed have, and use different and get the same sort of reactions from quite different kinds of faces and cultures. Essentially, this slide shows what we see when we do something. This is a Japanese man. I think he's looking at an auto ad. And what we get back is a video that puts that, if you like, that virtually that he has that spider mask on his face. And if this was a live demo, I'd be able to show you that no matter how he moves his face around, we can still pick up the movements on a second-by-second basis. And what you'd see at the bottom of him was, you know, his different emotions, anger, happiness, and surprise, moving in reaction to the stimulus we were showing him, which could be an advertisement stream to him or a YouTube video or whatever. But the super cool part of all this, the thing that I really like, is not just that we can measure emotion like that, but that this software actually has worked out how you can implement this in the real world. And that is in fact the hardest bit. It's about how you make sure that you can measure the emotion of the faces of someone who's wearing glasses or has beards or on a range of lighting conditions. So in fact, this system can measure the emotional reaction even if your lighting in your room is really, really quite low, and can do it quite accurately. So that means you can implement this over a wide range of systems. What that means is you can stick it in surveys. And so how this works is you might be in Confirmit or Dimensions or whatever your survey platform is. You ask a few questions. You then transport completely transparently to the respondent, then to an IBM cloud server where Enviso's software or whoever's doing it films the person, shows the video, and they're passively recorded. Obviously they have to agree to be filmed. They don't have to answer any questions, move any dials, and then they go back to the survey. So essentially we can get survey data and emotional response data from the same person. And that means a lot of emotion, not just emotion about the facial imaging, but also survey data. But even just from the facial imaging information on its own, you can get 7 data points a second, 7 emotions per stimulus. You can do a lot of stimulus. The most that we've done is 7 bank ads in one test. Same category, very similar, without confusion because there's no recall, no questions, it all happens simultaneously. We can create composite scores because another good thing about this kind of system is you can show people a blue screen as kind of benchmark and then measure their emotional change against it. So you can develop what we call emotional lift and other composite scores. So there's a lot of power there, but even more, as I'm going to mention in a moment, if this can be integrated with the responses we get out of the survey side. To illustrate, though, firstly, just what we get without asking any questions, without any at all, just from the facial things. I'm going to take you through very quickly through a couple of results from a Hong Kong and Shanghai bank ad that we looked at in the UK and in Hong Kong. It's a sort of ad about integrity values in which a fisherman goes out in a boat in the Mediterranean or somewhere on a dark night. They catch some fish later on. It's all very exciting and wonderful. They've caught some fish, but it turns out to be a dolphin. And then he's obviously, whoops, I've lost that slide. He obviously then has some issues about whether he should cut his net and lose his catch or what he should do. It's all about values, honesty and integrity and so on. As you can see in this chart here, we record responses to each emotion. I'm only showing 3 of them here on a second-by-second basis. So this ad started out very dark as he walked to his boat at an early morning. So it's got that blue sadness line coming up. There's a bit of surprise as people are working out what's going on, and then it builds to happiness. And you can see there is a moment when it really changes. We call that a linchpin moment, from happiness to from sadness to happiness. So we can, at a very granular basis, look at commercials or any video and associate emotions with imagery. And we can do, and this, I just want to get across how much we can get real microsecond changes just by taking the middle point of that ad. Yeah, this is happiness only and how it moves up and down across our sample. What you see is it started out rather dark, but then in the middle bit where it really goes up and down, we can trace by the second. First of all, there's a point where they catch the fish. Everybody's happy. Uh-oh, we see a shot of the dolphin in the net. We all get unhappy. There's a shot of a man grabbing the knife. This is a microsecond shot. We all get very worried because is he going to cut the net or is he going to kill the dolphin? Then he cuts the dolphin, we get happy. The dolphin swims free, we're all extremely happy. You can see that this change in emotion happens really rapidly. And then, of course, there's things like the logo and the bank and the branding, which causes other changes. The so what in all this is that, look, emotion drives interest and purchase. We're awash with marketing imagery, and we need to know what emotions, alternatives drive the most emotion. What scene appeals to teenage girls? Which of these trailers appeal most? We need to put emotion at the center of creative discourse, and I think this will help with the creative agencies and others in doing that. But the real value of all of this is not just telling a story about individual ads. To me, the real value comes when we can combine survey data with this facial imaging data. Here's a really simple example. It's from a beer ad. It was a Heineken ad. It was a really happy ad. And what you see here is that the males got the ad right off. You know, they're involved with beer, and the emotion builds throughout. And we're finding that emotional building is very important for advertising success. The woman, however, took a long time to get into it. They were lost right in the beginning. They went up and down. Eventually, they got it. Now, this probably wasn't aimed at women, so that may not matter. But if it was, you've got a good finding, because you're losing them early on, and you might start to think about how you changed the commercial or gave it more media weight or whatever. But it gets really interesting when we do more complex kind of analysis. And in this one from China, this is the actual ad is for a milk powder for expectant mothers, not a category we see much in developed markets. And it's full of warm pictures of mums and babies and expectant mums and growing brains and all this sort of things that you would expect, ingredients and so on. It's pretty well put together, to be honest. Now, what we've done here is we have used survey data to work out what which people reported themselves as being most engaged and liking it and which really didn't. And then we can see where those two groups differed where the likers differed from the dislikers, if you like. And what we see, first of all, is that there are only a few seconds, linchpin seconds, where there is a really big difference, and we're often seeing that. And we see that early on, the people that liked it more were more surprised. Later on, they were more happy. But there's 1 second that I wanted to show you, which is really interesting. At second 19 in this commercial, a shot appears where a fetus appears to reach out of the mother's stomach that she is patting. It's a very strange and interesting shot, and it provokes some fear and anger. Happiness drops among those people who otherwise really reported liking and being engaged with the ad. Now, I don't think that means that shot is bad. Rather, I think it gets them involved, engaged, and gets them ready to be interested in the positive outcome. So by using this kind of emotional analysis, we can see how to build, I think, better ads, how to put them together better, not just whether they are good or bad overall. My view is this is important because I think many neuromarketing solutions just simply lack context. We're discovering over and over again, for instance, work that we've done with Saatchi and Saatchi and looking at how love mark ads, or how people rate ads in terms of kind of what they call love mark status differ, that people's reaction to ads is reflected on their faces and that their demographics and other things influence them. Getting this kind of emotional reaction it's important to have context, and so sampling and sub-analysis and so on remains important. That means if we can get it scalably, then we can move from going the kind of tests and experiments that most people are talking about to ongoing learning and feedback systems. I like to think of facial imaging as neuroscience on steroids, as accurate but more scalable and therefore more repeatable. And I think repeating is the big thing. Inviso and others are working on implementing these kind of systems on mobile devices, on TVs and lab and theatre tests. You could use them in rocks and online quali. They're talking about how you can embed them in kiosks. So you can get feedback off many touch points and across many geographies. And to me, the real new MR is when we can take such soft, traditionally qualitative kinds of data, make them repeatable. Then we get into the big analytics that IBM and others are talking about, because we can get systematic learning. To me, the new MR revolution is not just the fact of trying to go beyond Likert scales to second-by-second direct observation, nor even from those banks of affective sliders and other those sort of virtual scales to simply recording passively. I think those sort of things are useful and good. The real advantage of these kinds of technologies in getting accurate passive response is when they become scalable and simple. Because to me, the revolution is making charts of this sort, which is obviously made up, easy and cost-effective. Frankly, we could, with our system, take 100 global CSD ads from the other and get the same kind of emotional lift or measures. We could relate that to Nielsen or IRI data or Millward Brown data on purchase or purchase intent or whatever, and come up with an understanding of which kinds of commercials had the most emotional lift and drove purchase. And from that, scalably and sensibly, we could move to understanding the specifics of mix of emotions, build and style that differentiate commercials that sell and intrigue from those that don't. And that, I think, means we could move from just the kind of talking about what made an ad work or not work, like I did with that milk powder ad, to talking about what generally builds better advertising, and being able to do that cost effectively and across the globe. That, to me, is a very genuine revolution. Thank you. Thank you for listening.